Hi everyone, it's Dr. Brad Meyer, and we're talking about the ATSSB tip number 1 for the snare drum A-tube. And this tip is on rolls. So you always want to make sure that you have a great roll bass that's going to allow you, not at the beginning of the process to sound great, but at the end when we're at tempo. So if we're practicing at half tempo, our rolls shouldn't sound great because they're going to be too slow, but as we work them up in tempo, they're going to sound great because we have the correct bass. So for me, I really enjoy having a sextuplet roll bass in here, and that's going to sound a little something like this if we started at measure 8. Now, if you're a younger student and that triplet bass is a little bit fast, you might just do a 16th note bass, and that still sounds pretty good, but not as good as the sextuplet. And so this is what the 16th note bass sounds like. As you can hear, the 16th note bass isn't quite as full, but it's going to be much easier to play in the long run if you're an early on student who's just starting to learn percussion or has trouble with that sextuplet feel. The next thing I would encourage you to do is to make sure that you make a big difference in your dynamics, especially when you roll. So for example, we have measure 21, and these have these beautiful crescendos from piano to forte. And so what we can do is, instead of leaving it as sextuplet or 16th, we can combine it by starting out slower with the 16th and then doing two sextuplet rhythms after it. So it will sound like this, with the buzz and then smoothed out. By doing that roll and increasing the rhythm, it allows that roll to have a lot more momentum into the next beat. Next, at measure 26, we see that going into measure 26, as well as the beginning of measure 26, we do not have tied rolls, unlike all the other rolls in the solo, so we want to put a little break in there. So the pickup to 26, which is a fermata, means to be held for a long period of time. We're going to play that big roll, and then we're going to have a little break, and then the next two, which are only accented rolls, are going to be accented but also have breaks. So these should have little spaces and should sound like this. As you heard, I put those breaks in there, but then when I got to the 8th note roll that was tied to the other 8th note, I connected it by not putting a little break in there. Lastly, as we're talking about rolls, we have some 16th note rolls, and again, we have a couple options here. For earlier on players, I'd recommend just keeping a single hand roll, and so that you're doing one buzz per 16th note, and that sounds like this. If you're an advanced player, I recommend a 32nd note roll bass. It makes it a little bit fuller and connects the roll a little bit better, and that sounds like this. As you can hear, the 32nd note roll has a little bit more body to it and helps connect that roll and not give it an accent on the beginning quite as much as the 16th note roll bass does. At the end of the day, just make sure that you're using a great roll bass that's going to allow your rolls to sound sustained and connected if they're tied, and separated if they have no tie on them. Hope those tips help, and best of luck on your audition.